How's it going, guys? This is Pizza Views, or Pizza View, and we're going to be doing a how to play of Medieval 2 Total War, Stainless Steel 6.4. Now, this game is kind of an old game. It's been around for a while, but with the semi-success of Empire and the somewhat success of Rome 2, a lot of players are sort of panning these new games. It really feels to me like Medieval 2 was the king and continues to be the king. So we're gonna go and look at this game again. It's a game I've played many times and have been playing for many years. So I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I do. This is my first video, and I'm sort of learning the ropes, just learning how to do one of these things. And I'm going to be gearing this video towards perhaps new players to the game, people who haven't played it before, or casual gamers, or people who just enjoy watching Let's Play videos of Medieval 2 Total War. So if you're looking for something a little bit more advanced, this video is probably not for you. I could do one. I'm a pretty advanced player. Not the best in the world, but it used to be pretty good. It's just that this video is more towards people that want to pick up the game for the first time, or who want to go back to basics and learn from the beginning what they should be looking for. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on in this video. Please keep in mind, this is my first attempt, so go easy on me. This is Portugal. I'm going to start with one of the early Catholic factions. Portugal starts here in Oporto with a very small army, and it's in a pretty poor territory. They have a difficult start. They're right up against the Leonese, who start with 3 provinces, and they're also up against the Moors, who are one of the largest early game factions, and they pretty much hate the Catholic factions. So right away they're surrounded by strong neutrals and very strong enemies. So what chance do they have? Well, they've got pretty decent chances, particularly because they've got some really decent units, and this video is going to be covering those units. This is pretty advanced in the campaign. I'm 62 turns in, but I've covered a lot of territory, and I just want to go over the units for Portugal. That's my focus of this video. First, let's start with some of the weakest unit in the game. Where do I have some of those I can show you an example of? Here we go. Peasant infantry. A lot of you are going to be thinking, why would you even recruit peasant infantry? They're worthless. Look at their stats. They've got no defense skill. They've got no shields, making them particularly vulnerable to missiles. But they're vulnerable to everything. They've got no defense, really. Their attack is poor. You can't really use these units in your army unless you really know what you're doing. So how would you use them? Well, the thing is, they are so cheap. Look at their upkeep, 85 per turn. This means you can field 200 men for 85 a turn, and the problem is they don't do very good in a fight. But what can they do? They can man your walls. You've got a settlement, you've got walls, and the walls have towers that can shoot they can shoot arrows at the enemy, and they can also shoot ballista if you upgrade the towers, or cannons later on. And in order for that to happen, you've got to have men on the walls or men behind the walls. And these units can man the walls and activate your wall defenses. Otherwise, your walls are not much of a challenge. All you need is a ladder to get over them. And they can be built in a single turn. So there's no defenses of your settlement unless there's men manning the walls. Peasant infantry can do that, and they can do that cheap. And while they're in the settlement, they can also help keep the public order. They're basically policemen. You can think of them like that. They're almost non-military units. They're just like civilian policemen. They can police the settlement, and they can defend it in a worst case scenario, you know. But they're not going to be great out in the field. If you had to bring them out on the field, what would you use them for? Primarily, you're not going to have them run up against the enemy and duke it out. No, you're going to have other units do that. The peasant infantry, however, can be used to flank the enemy or surround them with a mass of troops. This really only works if you're using the peasant infantry against another unit that's already engaged in melee with a superior unit. Otherwise, what's going to happen is your peasant infantry are going to get slaughtered, and you don't want that to happen. Maybe you do, maybe you don't care, but I do. I care about what happens to my units because I recruited them, I'm paying them, and I want to see them get home from the war in one piece. They're still cannon fodder, but I try to take good care of my troops. That's the theme of this video, is taking care of your troops and using them properly. You can use them to flank. You can use them to chase down routers because they're so lightly equipped, and they're not going to be spending a lot of time in a prolonged melee situation. So they're not going to get exhausted unless you have them run around with like chickens with their heads cut off. So they're going to be your fresh units, and they're going to be fast moving. That means they could be good at cleaning up fleeing units while your cavalry continues to engage the main force. They're okay at that because they've got pretty good running speed for an infantry unit. But mopping up routers is really more of a cavalry job. So they're only marginally good at that, but they're still better than most infantry at mopping up routers because of their fast running speed. And the fact that they're probably not going to be exhausted because you don't want to use them in a prolonged melee. So that's peasant infantry. Let's move on to some more professional troops, because those guys just aren't any good. I put most of Portugal's early units in this fort here so we can discuss them. The next one is the Spear Militia. Now, this one's got a little bit more experience and a little bit more armor than what you'd start out with, but it's still basically the same. They're still peasant militia. They're not great quality troops. They've got reduced morale in the field. However, look at their defense and look at their attack. After you get them experience, their attack goes up, their defenses go up, especially if you armor them and give them some experience. The main use for these troops is as a line unit. Because of their relatively low attack, you're not going to want to use these units to try to destroy enemy forces. That's not what they're good for. When they start out, they're only as good as peasant infantry in terms of offensive power, which is pathetic. You can do better. Trust me, you can do a lot better. Don't use these units offensively. They're used for pinning the enemy down. They're what would be considered the anvil in a hammer and anvil technique, which is you pin the enemy against the anvil, and then you hammer away at it. Primarily, you're going to be using the Spear Militia to engage the enemy line, which is their line of infantry or whatever other non-cavalry units they have. Pin them down, engage them in a melee fight, and then use other units to wipe them up, which would be more like your cavalry, or a heavier infantry unit, or anything else really. What you want to do is you want to pin them and immobilize them. Then your archers can take them out, or your cavalry can take them out, or something. But know that the militia spearmen themselves are not going to be doing a lot of the killing. And the longer you keep them in that line, engaged in battle, the more they're going to die. So, for these lower quality troops, you want to use them just as a stationary point to stop the enemy line. And you don't want to keep them there for ages, because these are just militia troops. They're not professional soldiers, really. They've been given some training, but they're more like civilians with spears and shields. They're not going to last long against more professional troops that have gotten some really good equipment and some really good training. So, don't rely on them to really hold the line for much longer than it would take for you to move your other troops around to deliver the killing blow. After that happens, they've been engaged in melee for long enough that they've started to take some real casualties. And once they do, their morale's going to drop, their effectiveness is going to drop, and you're not going to be able to wage much of a campaign with a half-dead army. So, try to keep these guys alive if you can. They're going to be the backbone of your army for a while. Portugal doesn't have much in the way of spearmen early. They get urban spear militia later, but only in cities, and you don't start with cities. So, these are going to be your main infantry unit for a while, at least most of the early campaign. And you got to use them right and treat them right in order to get some use out of them. They're not the greatest infantry in the world, trust me. Even urban spear militia aren't the best, but they come with 50 more units, or 50 more men per unit. So the urban spear militia are going to be much better, but you don't get them until later. And until you do, you just got to work with the spear militia. But once you get to a castle level, your barracks can produce light men-at-arms. These are much better infantry. These guys, check out their attack. Their attack is 5. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, but in this game, 1 is poor, 2 is okay, 3 is good, and so on. You're not going to get a really, really, really high attack except from a charging unit of heavy cavalry with its charge bonus. Then you can get something like 20 attack. But that's not going to happen usually. And high attack on an infantry unit is impressive because that means that when they're engaged in a melee, in a fight to the death with another infantry unit, they're going to be the ones doing most of the killing. They're going to actually wear down and destroy other infantry units. And that's what you want from a really good infantry unit. You don't want one that just holds the line. As a matter of fact, because these are light men-at-arms, they're not that great at holding a line against, let's say, a cavalry attack. They don't have spears, so they're not going to be great against cavalry unless the cavalry is stationary. Then their high attack will come into play and their high defense will come into play. But until then, you mainly want to keep these guys engaged against infantry and archers. They're great at destroying archers. They're good at destroying other infantry. That's what they're for. If you are trying to take a settlement, you're going to want these guys to take the walls, use them in siege towers, and you can also use them, if they're fresh and they haven't taken a lot of casualties, to engage the enemy infantry at the center of town. Because those units aren't going to run away, so they're going to be sitting there and slogging it out until every last one of them are dead, or you control the city center. That's what you need these guys for. The only way you're really going to destroy all those guys is if you slug it out with high attack infantry. Well, there are other ways you can do it, and I'll get into those later. But for right now, one of your early goals on the campaign is to get a castle and build a barracks. Let's see if I can find one for you. Yeah, right here. Here's a regular castle, and it's got a drill square. The drill square is where you can get light men-at-arms. And some of your earliest castles, you can get to Toledo. You can take it from the Portuguese, or I'm sorry, the Leonese. You could also upgrade Oporto, but it takes a little while. Let's see. Granada. Granada is a castle at the start, and I believe. And the Moors, if it isn't already a castle, they're going to turn it into one really quick. So one of the earliest castles is Granada, also Valencia. If you can get these settlements, they're early castles, and that's where you can get some light men-at-arms. And those units are really good. And especially, check out the quality of the unit that you're getting for the price. Alright, here's your urban spear militia, they cost 180. Here's your light men-at-arms, they cost 180. Okay? They cost less than 2 units of peasants. Okay? You got 2 units of what? Peasant infantry, and they cost how much? 85? 85, alright. So it's about, it's a little bit more. So 85 and 85, that'd be 170. So this is 180. And these are far better troops. Far better troops. So that's a lot of bang for your buck. They're not as good as the next unit, which is the mailed foot knights. But I mean, compare them. 360 upkeep for 6 attack and 17 defense versus 5 attack and 16 defense for 180. Okay? So you can fill your armies with these guys, just like they were a regular infantry unit or regular, low-cost unit of spears, and they're going to do great for you. This is a really good price for a unit of this quality. So when you can, make them. Recruit as many as you can, and put several in your army. Trouble is, you're not going to be able to make that many of them that quickly, unless you like doing a slow campaign, and you're not going to be conquering very far before you start being able to produce these things. But once you get them, they're great. Mailed Foot Knights. That's going to be your next one. If you have to take a settlement, and it's manned with a heavy garrison, a lot of infantry units, a lot of archer units, you're going to want these units that can take a punch. They can take some archer fire while they're climbing the towers. They can get on the wall and slug it out with just about any other infantry unit and take the walls from the enemy. Once you do that, then you can enter the settlement, and pretty much the enemy retreats to the center of town. And these are great for taking the center of town as well. Look at you can charge to the center, get their charge bonus. Their attack is really high for an infantry unit, and their defense is great, so they can slug it out. They've got good stamina and good morale, and stamina is important because they're going to be doing a lot of prolonged fighting. So you want a unit that can do that. But what you want to do is keep these guys healthy and keep these guys from tiring out. Don't have them charge, and if they start to get too tired, disengage them from the enemy and let them sit for a while so they can recharge, so to speak. Because once they get exhausted, they're not going to come back from that. You want to avoid exhaustion. Make sure that they only get winded, and then let them catch their breath, and then have them re-engage. And keep them healthy. Don't let them get hit by enemy crossbow bolts, prolonged archer fire. Don't let them get hit by catapults, ballista, things of that nature. You really don't want them taking a direct cavalry charge, because they're not great against... They don't have a bonus against cavalry. I mean, they're great defensively, but still, a nice, decent cavalry charge is going to take out a good chunk of these guys. So, avoid situations where the enemy has a high attack. Alright? Don't let them get hit by charges. Don't let them get hit by missiles that can penetrate armor. That's going to kill these guys. Keep them away from that. Use your other units to engage that kind of stuff. Crossbows. Use your cheaper units to engage crossbows. Send your spearmen after them if you want. Send a unit of peasants or pilgrims at the crossbows. Anything that will stop the crossbow guys from shooting at your mailed foot knights. That's why they're called cannon fodder. Use them to take damage in place of your units that you really, really don't want taking any damage. Protect your mailed foot knights like they're precious. Okay? Other units, not so much. It just takes a while. There's very few places you can recruit them, and you have to march them all the way back to a settlement that can recruit them in order to give them more men. So you really want to protect these guys while they're on a long campaign. Whittling them down to 10 men in an army that's supposed to have 123 of them means that they're gone. So don't do that. Just protect them as best you can. And that covers your infantry, really, at least your non-mercenary infantry. But let's talk about the mercenaries. You're not just stuck with these infantry units, which are very few. I mean, you've got militia, and then some real infantry. And that's good enough. But around the Iberian Peninsula and basically everywhere in Western Europe, you can get these units. When you're on a crusade, you can get pilgrims, but they're basically peasant infantry, and we've already covered those. And they're worse than peasant infantry in terms of you can't retrain them and put more men in them. You have to recruit them directly from a crusade, so they're worth less to me than peasant infantry. Still, They are men. You can use them to restore public order. You can leave them behind without feeling too bad about it. I mean, these are just guys with knives, so um, you'll be fine leaving them behind and moving the rest of your army onward. But let's talk about some real mercenaries. The mercenary spearmen, well, they're quite a bit more advanced than your ordinary spearmen. Wouldn't it be nice if you could recruit guys like these? Well, you can. It's just that they're really expensive. Look at your spear militia are recruited. Their upkeep's 115. They've got 2 attack and 10 defense when I've got these experience and armor upgrades on them. But right out of the bat, mercenary spearman usually comes with some experience points. 14 defense, 4 attack, 3 charge bonus, means they're really good for charging an enemy line. They're great in melee, and so they've got a decent shield, good defense skill, and great armor. Alright? Well, they're going to cost almost 3 times as much as a regular unit of spearmen, so you can't form huge armies with these guys, either quickly or cheaply. You got to find them, you've got to recruit them out in the field, and they're expensive as hell. So these guys are going to be rare. They're not going to be the main component of your armies usually. But that being said, oh my, they're so good against enemy generals, enemy cavalry. They can hold the line for longer than your militia units can. They've got good morale. They're just slow moving, and you don't want to exhaust them. Any unit that's exhausted has its combat ability cut down by quite a bit, and they can be chain routed. And what that means is that once the line starts to run away, and they're near other units that are running away, their morale will sharply drop, and their fighting ability is already down because they're tired. So you don't want to exhaust these guys either. Protect them from exhaustion, and also protect them against things like javelin men or crossbows. Next, let's talk about macemen. These are mid-level infantry units that you can get fairly cheaply. I mean, they're still much more expensive than your regular units, and they're more expensive than light men-at-arms by quite a bit. But they start off with really good attack, 3, which is really great against units that only have 1 attack, and they're great against armored units, like these foot knights or armored spearmen, or even cavalry units and generals. Their weapon is particularly good against armor, so they get a bonus against armor. They've got good morale and good stamina, and they're great in the woods. So these units you can use in specific situations where they will really shine. I wouldn't use them as, like, let's say, an unaccompanied main line of your forces, because then a cavalry charge will just obliterate them. They're not going to do great against a direct cavalry charge, but they will do okay when fighting against other infantry units, especially if they're in the woods, or if they're on the walls, or in another situation where they're not going to get flanked or hit by missiles. Now, they've got a nice shield, but you still don't want to get them worn down with cheap and easy-to-find missile units. So you want to protect them. What else we got? Crusader sergeants are basically the exact same thing as mercenary spearmen. I think the only difference between these two units is the fact that this unit doesn't have any experience and this one does. The upkeep is about the same, and one of the disadvantages of these units is that, like pilgrims, you can only get them on crusade. So unlike mercenary spearmen, where you can readily recruit more or even retrain them in regions where they're likely to be found, you can't retrain crusader sergeants or crusader foot knights. You can only go on another crusade and get more, or go to a region that has them while on crusade to get more. I mean, they're great units, and they're much better than your ordinary spearmen. And when you're on a crusade, these guys should be your main line fighters. Don't use your spear militia. When you can get crusader sergeants, use them as your main line. Recruit as many of them as you can, and use them to form the backbone of your forces. That's what you want, especially early on, before you can get some better units later on. That's when they really shine. And they've got a high enough attack and a high enough charge bonus that they can serve as regular infantry even when they're not fighting against cavalry. They can serve in an offensive capacity rather than purely defensive. But it's still not the greatest. You know, they're like mid-level troops. Their main plus is their defense and their fighting against cavalry. Crusader Foot Knights. Here's the problem. These are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful units, except they're slow and they cost a fortune. Look at the upkeep on this, 520. Okay. Compare that to how much money you get from a single province. Okay? If you have 2 of these units, it's going to cost you as much as 1 of your provinces. And I'm sorry, but you can't defend your entire nation with 2 units of these guys. I mean, they're great, but in my opinion, they're not really worth the cost in upkeep. When the crusade is over, you might do yourself a solid and just disband them entirely. Unless you're already a really rich empire, you can't afford these units. You could afford 5 or 6 or 7 units for the price of this 1 unit. And in any situation, 7 units are going to defeat 1 if you have a commander that knows how to use it properly. You could defeat an order of mercenary Frankish knights with 5 peasant archers if you use them correctly. Alright? So, don't be fooled by the great stats and the high price tag. They're not worth as much as more units. That's why I put so much emphasis on how do you use your cheap units. Crusader Foot Knights, some of the best units you'll ever find in infantry. At the same time, not worth their cost. If you send Crusader Foot Knights at me, I will take them out with my crossbowmen and one single charge of my general's unit. It's probably going to be enough to break them up, because the crossbow bolts will penetrate their armor, and I'll hit them with my general's unit, and it will start to demoralize them, and will distract them from charging into my crossbowmen, and my crossbowmen will get off another hit, and that's it. I mean, they're too slow. They're stationary targets, pretty much. I mean, they can run, but they're not going to run that fast. So your crossbowmen and your cavalry are going to make short work of these otherwise really powerful units. So don't put them in situations where cheaper units can take advantage of them like that. Protect them. They're precious. I mean, you're spending 520 gold per turn on these guys. So don't use them like an ordinary unit. Think of them like a general. You're not going to just throw your general in the middle of a line of spears and hope everything works out and that he doesn't die. Alright? So don't do the same thing with your Crusader Foot Knights. They're too expensive, they're too rare, and they're too powerful to be used in that way. Use them when it's crucial that you have a powerful infantry unit with high attack and high defense. And don't ever use it in a situation where they're going to get hit by crossbow bolts or cavalry charges, or that they can be flanked and outmanned. So don't stick them on the field where they can get easily surrounded. These guys will do much better in sieges, where it's close quarters combat, they cannot be flanked. They can take the walls, they can take the city center, they've got great morale and excellent stamina, so they can withstand a prolonged fight. That's what these guys are for. When you put them in the field, keep them in your reserves. Keep them away from the enemy missiles, away from enemy cavalry, and even away from enemy infantry until you're sure that it's safe to engage. Because once they're engaged, their focus and their attention is on one unit, and their flanks are exposed, and they're starting to wear down, and they can't move fast because they're heavily armored units. Once they become that stationary target, they are vulnerable, and they're too valuable to be that vulnerable. I may be overstating the importance of these units. They're really not, they're more of an afterthought. You don't get enough of them to really form armies out of them, except if you were ambitious enough to try to do so, and you were that rich. So these units are going to be rare, and they're going to engage in combat, and they're going to take losses, and you can't replace those losses. So they're almost a one-trick pony. They do their one job really, really well, but they're not an ordinary unit and should not be used as such. Use them in specific situations where it would cost you 500 men to accomplish the same task, which would be something like taking the walls or taking the city center. After you've checked that off your list, then the Crusader Foot Knight is almost just too expensive to be even used. It's sort of like if you were to make an axe out of gold and you're going to use that to cut down trees. It's such a waste of the gold. Use a different kind of material for that task. These Crusader Foot Knights are basically golden warriors, even though they're gray and white. Think of them as being solid gold. You're not going to use them except as the treasure that they are. Put them in specific situations only. Otherwise, keep them out of battle because they're just too rare to be used as cannon fodder. Now, let's talk about Breton Light Cavalry. Okay, these guys can throw javelins, and you can find them around here, I believe, and in the French and the British area, the French and English area, up here as mercenaries. So Portugal's not going to get them that quickly. But I did recruit some when I was up here somewhere. They're basically javelin cavalry, and they're expensive, and you're not going to get that many of them. They're useful units, and they're fast-moving, and all that. They're really great. But everything that they can do, your javelin cavalry can do just as well, if not better. Where are they? Here they are. They're basically this unit. And let's get back to talking about our main units. Genites, or if I'm mispronouncing that, just let me know. These guys, good morale, good stamina, fast-moving, which is a quality, yeah, they don't even have the fast-moving thing. So your Genites can move even faster, apparently. Let's compare the stats. 5, 11, 9, 5... 5, 11, 6, 9. So lower charge bonus but higher defense on the Genites. And you can recruit these at basically any castle that has even the smallest stables. So they can be found everywhere, and these units are the reason why you would want to play as Portugal or as Leon, the Leonese. These guys are world beaters, they're conquerors, they're general killers. These are assassins on horseback, and I'm going to tell you why. Look at the missile attack, 11. They're fast-moving, they can charge right up to the enemy, stop, and hurl these missiles, which will obliterate especially cavalry, especially generals units, anything that has small numbers and high armor. Like, look at this, here's my Prince guy, Prince Matthias the Saint. His General's Bodyguard unit has got 41 men in it, so he's a really large bodyguard unit. He's got 20 defense, 8 attack, 14 charge bonus. He's extremely powerful and extremely experienced, and in most situations, this unit is going to beat any other unit. But match him up against the faster-moving Genites. He can't catch them. They're going to outrun him. And while they're outrunning him, they're going to be peppering him with missiles that can penetrate his armor and destroy his unit. They're going to throw volley after volley. I believe you get 3 shots with each unit. So you're going to be able to throw 180 javelins, if I'm correct, at the enemy general. And most of those javelins are going to hit, and most of his unit is going to be destroyed. And that's for 185 upkeep. The price of a unit of spearmen. In fact, yeah, the urban spear militia is 180. So once you're fielding urban spear militia, you should be fielding a ton of Genites. Upkeep 185. You can recruit them anywhere, and they can assassinate the hell out of any general, no matter how powerful. If they can't do it one-on-one, then double them up. Put 2 on 1. Any 2 of these Genites units are going to slaughter any other cavalry unit. You can throw a unit of mercenary Frankish knights at them. They're not fast enough. They won't be able to catch the Genites. And the Genites will be able to penetrate their armor and wipe them out, and do it very, very, very cheaply. So these are assassins. Think of them that way. You wouldn't use an assassin as a soldier wearing armor who's trying to conquer a castle. No, that's not what an assassin is. Assassin is someone who sneaks in, kills the target, and then gets the hell out of there. That's what Genites are. You're not going to use them as knights on horseback, and you're not going to use them in melee. I know it says 5 for melee attack here, but look at the defense. They're weaker than your weakest spear militia unit for defense. Do not use them in a prolonged melee. They don't have the defense for that. They're not that armored. Their shield is kind of tiny. Their defense skill is never going to be that great. It's going to be better than average, but there's only 60 men in this unit. They get surrounded by even 1 unit of spears, and that could be it. And these units are too useful to be thrown away that way. Let's see what else. Well, now that we've covered the first unit of cavalry, let's talk about mailed knights. Now, this unit's taken some hits, so they're usually 60 in a unit, but he's gotten some experience, so he's good. I can't show you the proper upkeep for those units until I go over here. There we go. 450. Here's a proper unit of those. 450 upkeep, 790 recruitment cost. These are no laughing matter. These are serious units. And remember what we've talked about. These units can be taken out by javelins rather easily. So keep them away from any kind of crossbow bolts or javelins or any kind of missiles that can penetrate armor. Keep them away from artillery fire. And don't let them get surrounded. They're too powerful and too useful for that. They're good out in the open fields where they can form a charge, crash into an already engaged unit, and then get the hell out of there before they take too much damage. So they're good for killing enemy units and causing them to rout. And once they rout, they're fast enough where they can just wipe them out completely. There's a reason why when we think of the Middle Ages, we think of the heavy cavalry or, heavy cavalry charges as being the single most devastating thing of that era. Because if used properly, they certainly can be. A few units of knights may not be able to take out an entire army of armored spearmen. But even then, if you use them properly, they can cause a lot of damage to the flanks and cause the unit's morale to drop enough where they could start running away. And once they do, it's curtains for the line of infantry. These units are relentless, especially if you pull them out of battle and charge them right back in over and over and over again as part of the hammer and anvil strategy. Pin the units with something else, and then hit them with the mailed knights over and over again until they're dead. Now granted, they're going to take some casualties while they're doing this, but 60 men versus like 600 men, and they're going to wipe out all of them, probably. That's a good trade. I mean, this is 450 upkeep, but let's say they wipe out 5 units in that one battle. Well, that's going to help you win the battle. And then the rest of your units are going to survive and go on, and you can always retrain these guys at the nearest castle that can recruit them. There's going to be enough of them peppering the landscape that this is doable. And if you've got several units of these, chances are they can wipe out the enemy, and you're not going to take too many casualties with them, especially if you micromanage them. One thing you don't want to do is put these units under... Well, you can put them under AI control. The AI does okay with them, but don't leave them unattended. Don't throw them against the enemy and then go focus on other things and hope they'll be okay. They're not going to be okay after the first charge, and then they just sit there like sitting ducks. Don't just park them next to infantry. Infantry will surround and destroy superior units by superior numbers. Don't let this happen to your knights. Feudal knights happen later on. When you get a fortress level settlement, you've got to get a fortress to recruit them, I believe. Yes, feudal knights happen at the fortress. They come directly from the castle itself. I haven't even upgraded the original stables, and in this mod, the stables don't do anything except give you more genites. So it's not even the stables that are giving you this kind of cavalry. You get them as soon as you upgrade to a fortress, and then you can recruit them, and look at how expensive they are. Well, it says 888, but that's because I've got this guy here who's got a Master Smith, 10% discount on training costs, and 10% discount on training costs, again, with the Mercenary Captain. But this is what they usually cost. Recruitment cost, 1,110 just to recruit them. So it's going to take, I mean, look at this settlement here, 1311. It's going to take almost the entire tax burden of one province just to recruit the guys for one turn. And then for the rest of the time, it's going to be about half that, just an upkeep every turn. So you recruit 2 of these, it's like you're recruiting one every turn for the rest of their existence. That's extremely expensive. You wouldn't do that until you can afford it, because one unit of these feudal knights is not, under any circumstances, as good as the equivalent amount of genites. Okay? You put, 3 of these on the battlefield, they will outperform feudal knights in 99 situations out of 100. The only time they won't is when you need to crash the cavalry unit into enemy infantry over and over again. Then your feudal knights will outperform those genites, but only marginally, because, 60 times 3 genites versus infantry is going to be more offense than even a single unit of 62 feudal knights. It may work out, because the feudal knights are going to last longer, so it'll catch up. But still, I'd much rather have the flexibility of having 3 different units on the battlefield that can all assassinate the enemy general or enemy cavalry like feudal knights than just having one single unit of feudal knights. With all that being said, if you can afford to put these guys on the battlefield, these are your professional heavy cavalry, and they will be for a long portion of the game. After the opening, what you can do with these guys is incredible. They've got very powerful charge. They've got great stamina. They're not going to flee. They can get out of a tight spot. They can even get surrounded by the enemy, and you can order them to escape, and most of them will get out alive. And then you'll be able to charge right back into the enemy and crush them again and again. They'll even do great against generals' bodyguard units, which is something I can't say for most units of cavalry. Usually the general's bodyguard unit will be superior. And mailed knights, the general's bodyguard can usually take these guys out. The defense difference between mailed knights and feudal knights is severe. That's 4 defense difference. The armor is doubled on these guys, and that's no laughing matter. Then their offensive ability is increased greatly, so they can go toe-to-toe with your best generals. And because they're a superior-sized unit, 62 of them, I wouldn't send anyone except your king with his 51 bodyguards against such a unit. And I really would try to avoid that as well. In a prolonged battle, you're pretty likely to lose your king to being assassinated by one of those feudal knights. It's that cavalry is just too powerful. You don't want to engage feudal knights for very long with any other cavalry unit. The only time you want to engage feudal knights is when you've got a mass of armored infantry or a mass of spears or javelins. I favor javelins. Kill them with the javelins, or kill them with crossbow bolts. Then surround them with your cheapest unit of spearmen, and it'll do the job. You're still going to take heavy casualties. I mean, these are feudal frigging knights. This is not a pushover. There's a reason why they were feared for 1,000 years. Okay, so really just avoid slugging it out with them, and avoid at all costs a direct cavalry charge from them. There are ways that you can soften the blow. Let's say I've got a unit of peasants or pilgrims that are otherwise useless to me. I mean, come on, look at these guys. 53, I mean, they're already weakened. They've got no chance. So I toss these guys, and I charge them directly into a unit of feudal knights that is charging into my line. They're going to hit the pilgrims, and the pilgrims are going to be wiped out. But it's going to blunt the charge of the feudal knights, because they just charged into a unit, and now they're massacring them. So now they're almost stationary targets. At that point, I can take some of my spear militia, or my urban spear militia, and surround them, because they've charged right up to my line, and now they're stationary. So that's what you do. You blunt their charge with some units that you can afford to say bye-bye to. That's why they're called cannon fodder. And then you surround them with units that have a bonus fighting them, because you're going to need a bonus. Your little piddling 3 for attack against a feudal knight with their 17 defense, it's still going to take a while to kill them. And they might escape too. But your objective is to blunt their charge and to take them down as much as you can before they get away. That's pretty much the only way you're going to deal with feudal knights, except with maybe other feudal knights, or, like I said, your mobile assassins on horseback. Those will be your best bet. Crossbowmen are great, but they're only going to get off one volley of crossbow bolts before the feudal knights crash into them. And after that, it's over. They're not going to be able to outrun them, and they're going to be probably routing instantly. So these archer units can hit them maybe once, maybe twice, but they're going to die. And their missile attack isn't even as good as the crossbow bolts. You might as well throw peasant crossbowmen at them instead, because the defense is basically zero either way. You're not going to... Their little armor and defensive skill means nothing. You know, their feeble skills are no match for the power of the dark side. That is feudal knights. They're just going to die regardless of what it says here. 11 defense, it doesn't matter. Feudal knights charging into them means they have basically 0 defense. They're all going to die, they're going to run away, and once they start running, they have 0 offensive or defensive capabilities. So, a unit of professional archers is just as combat effective as a unit of peasant crossbowmen if you're going to be talking about feudal knights. They're just in a class of their own, and the defenses of other units hardly ever come into play except when you're talking about really heavy infantry or other heavy cavalry units. That's the only time where they're even going to be slowed down by another unit. Javelin men, on the other hand, even better than Genites in this situation, because there's just so many of them. If you have 60 feudal knights coming at you, 120 javelins is better than 60. And they're only going to get off that one hit probably before they hit you, but you want to get those javelin men in there with their 12 missile attack and hit those charging feudal knights right in the chest, knock them off their horses, and they're dead after that. And you're doing it for 180 per turn. These javelin men and these mounted javelin men are the reason why you would want to play as Portugal. They're the heart and soul of this faction. I mean, any other faction has got men-at-arms and mailed foot knights and all that. So there's nothing special going on here. But javelin men? Yes. These are your units. That's why you want to play as this faction. Oh, what else did I cover? Peasant archers, your levy archers here. I didn't really talk too much about the archer units. These guys are superior to peasant infantry for a very simple reason. A, their upkeep is smaller. This unit is slightly depleted, but at 120, their upkeep would only be 60. So they're cheaper even than the cheapest peasant infantry. Their melee attack is exactly the same, and their defense is exactly the same. They're both going to start at 1. The thing is, archers can get a little bit of armor on them. They can get, I think I've got light mail or something on these archers, so their defense is 2. Whoop-de-doo, though, because it means jack squat. Throwing armor on archers is kind of a waste of your time. They're still going to rout, and the defensive skill of 0, the 0 shield, they're not going to stand up against missile. They're not going to stand up against infantry. They're never going to stand up against any kind of cavalry charge. So they're pathetic. Wasting your time putting armor on these guys. The only reason why they even have armor is because I recruited them at a place that had an armor shop. Alright, so what's the point? They're just like crossbowmen. Until you get to mercenary crossbowmen, which have got some decent defense of 6 defensive skill and nice armor coat covering them, that's the only time a crossbowman is actually gonna it's even gonna matter that they have any defense. Because what are the situations where the defense matters? When they get hit by cavalry, which means every single archer unit that gets hit by cavalry is going to start running away. Except for your most highly advanced, highly experienced, heavily armored archers that are in the late game for certain factions. Almost every missile unit is going to run away after it gets hit by cavalry. So all your armor throwing on these units is just a waste of your time. But other times when it will matter is if they're going up against infantry units. In a worst case scenario, they've got a knife or something, these mercenary crossbowmen, and they're professional soldiers with decent defense skills and good offensive skills. I mean, they've seen enough combat where they can actually hold their own with a sword or whatever they have on them. They're not great infantry units, but they're about the only archer units, besides I'd say some of England's professional archer units, or maybe the Muslim archers that come out of Sicily. There are very few archer units that can really serve in any capacity as infantry. But mercenary crossbowmen can do that. And that's what they can do. Levy archers will not. So throwing armor on them is useless. Even getting them more experienced is not going to improve their defenses by much. So all they're really there for is to fire missiles. They can, and their missile attack is 1. So when they hit the enemy, it's not going to cause a whole lot of deaths. It can't penetrate armor. It's not going to penetrate shields. You're only going to get 1 or 2 lucky shots that actually kill anybody. You know, you're hitting somebody in the neck to cause a death at that point. Very difficult to do. So their missiles are really used for attacking a unit that can't get away. Because it's going to take volley after volley after volley after volley of missiles for you to even cause casualties. Or realistically, that situation would be when you've got the enemy pinned inside an enemy settlement where they can't get away. Mostly at the center of the city, when you've got them surrounded by your infantry. Have your infantry hold their ground outside of the city center, a few paces away from the city center, so that when a unit comes out to try to engage you, they're completely outside of that zone where they can't run away. That city center where they've got infinite morale and they can never run. Once they're outside of that and they can retreat back into the city center, just put your melee units just a little bit further than that to have them engage. And then what you want to do is you want to put your archers behind them and have them arc their missiles over the heads of your units and hit the infantry or whatever units that are inside the city center that can't escape, and just pepper them with arrows over and over and over again until they're finally dead. That's how you can use these offensively. You can also use them against units that are engaged in a fight, and you set the flaming arrows on them, and you get a good shot. You know, you move your unit to the side or even to the flank, to the rear, and just start shooting over and over again with your flaming arrows. Or you put them on the top of a hill, away from the battle, and you have them fire down into the enemy units. The thing is, you're going to hit your own troops with these guys, because their accuracy isn't that great, and once they got the flaming missiles, they're going to start hitting your own troops with them. you know, it's a kind of a double-edged sword here. So really, I find marginal use for these guys, except when I use them as a garrison. What better place to put them than on the walls of a castle? You're getting them to activate the archer towers or ballista towers. You're holding the walls with some kind of unit. And if you're fighting against a unit that's climbing the walls with ladders, you know, you get a little bit of a bonus because you're surrounding them. You know, you've got like 10 guys that can attack a single guy coming off a ladder. So the archers are going to have the advantage even though their combat rating is so low. That's about the only time they really shine. You put them on the walls. You line them on the walls of a settlement. Or you use them to attack units that can never, ever attack them. Units that are pinned or trapped or behind a wall. Can't think of any other uses for them. They're fine along with peasant infantry for constructing siege equipment outside of the walls. You can use them to man the ram. You know, they're a cheap, low-value unit. You can put them in danger and have them absorb enemy missile fire. It's just that they're not going to do it that well. They've got no shield and no defense skill. These guys get hit with a missile and they're dead. You can throw armor on them. It's not really going to matter that much. I mean, against other levy archers with their 1 missile attack and their 2 armor, that's fine, I guess, but they're going to die. You know, these units are basically defenseless. So don't use them in any way where they need to use their defensive rating. That's the long and the short of it. Crossbowmen. We've talked about crossbowmen. These guys are going to be able to get off one shot against a charging unit of cavalry, and that's going to cause heavy damage for their class. They're going to punch above their weight level, so to speak. Recruitment costs 125. You can recruit hordes of these things easily. And that's the other thing. Castles with the ability to recruit these things are going to be able to recruit lots of them. They can... see? Available 3. You can let them... the pool build up until there's 3 of them, and recruit them 3 at a time, and they replenish quickly. They only take a few turns, or a couple of turns to replenish. So you're going to be able to hire a lot of these guys. In a pinch, they could be used as a line in front of your spearmen. Throw some spear militia out there, and then throw your peasant crossbowmen in front of them, so they can get a direct shot. That's the thing about crossbowmen. They're most effective when they can get a direct shot. Not like an archer, which has to arch the arrows. Peasant crossbowmen want like a gun shot. They don't want to arch their missiles too much, because then they lose a lot of that force and accuracy. When they're aiming directly at the enemy, which is when they're most defenseless, they've got a clear line of sight, and most of the force of the bolt goes directly into the enemy, as opposed to shooting it in the air and then letting it fall back down to the earth. It's not as effective that way. So you want to put these troops in a position where there's nothing in front of them except the enemy, and they've got a direct shot at them. The problem with this is that cavalry will then be able to charge directly into them. And infantry will also be able to charge directly into them. Once that happens, they're useless. They've got to run away. They've got to be put on skirmisher mode and run away from the battle, otherwise they're done. So their best use is when they get off that first shot at the enemy's unit, and hopefully it's a expensive unit like a feudal knight or a heavy unit of infantry or mercenary spearmen or a general or whatever. They can get off that first shot and have it kill a bunch of expensive units, then they've done their job. Then they can retreat behind the militia, spearmen, or whatever you've got. And then they can try to pick them off with their arched missile fire. Or you can put them on a hill is also useful, because then they can shoot directly over your troops without having to arch it. So they're good when they have the high ground. They're not as great when they're on the walls, because in order to hit the enemy, they've got to arch their shots. So they're not as great on the walls. They're much better when they've got a clean shot at the enemy. If you can surround the city center with these guys at a distance, and have them pull behind some malicious spearmen when the enemy charges out to meet you, then what's going to happen is they're going to kill a bunch of expensive units with their direct shot. Then the enemy sallies out to try to get them. Alright, well now move your crossbowmen behind the spear militia that you've got right behind them, and then the enemy's going to engage the spear militia. Alright, and then pick them off with your peasant crossbowmen again, and it'll cause them to flee back to the center of town. Okay, well don't move your spear militia in for the kill, just keep them steady. Then move your peasant crossbowmen in front of the spear militia again, and have them shoot that direct shot, that highly accurate killing direct shot. And because they've got a lot of ammo, they're going to be more effective over time than your javelin men will. In most other situations, the javelin men are going to be superior. This is the only situation where your peasant crossbowmen can actually inflict more casualties, because they're going to be able to shoot volley after volley after volley, because they've got way more missiles than javelin men. And they're going to be able to kill a lot of troops with every shot. And as long as you keep them out of melee, and you keep giving them a chance to shoot directly at the enemy, they're going to cause huge casualties among spear militia, among other archers, among generals, anything. And that's the advantage they have. If you've got a mass of mailed knights and generals or whatever in the center of town, you can do a really good job of taking them out without having to conquer the city center with a whole bunch of infantry units. You can just wedge a couple of these guys, the spear militia and the peasant crossbowmen, in one of those little side corridors, those little side streets where there's no room to maneuver. Basically, the enemy will charge and hit your spear militia, and they're not even going to be able to do a proper formed charge because it's such tight quarters. And then it's cavalry versus spearmen, and then they're being picked off by crossbowmen who are at close range. It's just a bad situation where these two cheap units working in tandem can knock out really expensive units in a situation where on the open battlefield these guys would be sitting ducks. That tactic can be used on the open battlefield a little bit. Crossbowmen behind the spear militia. It's just that the cavalry are going to be able to get that form charge in, could cause both units to rout if given enough time. So your best bet when taking out armored units in the city center is to use some combination of crossbowmen and infantry that can withstand melee for a while with high defense. Use the crossbowmen offensively and the spear militia to keep the enemy away from your crossbowmen. That's all they're going to be used for. And I'm going to show you in a battle at some point how this can be used so effectively. Again, the point I'm trying to make with this video is that your objective should be to use the units in the way they were meant to, in ways that are the most effective, and cause the most amount of casualties on the opponent's side with the least amount of casualties for your side. Because the economics of war is men and gold. You don't want your men to die, and you don't want to have expensive units everywhere performing only marginally more effectively than cheap units. In fact, you want to have more cheap units so that you have more men on the field, and you want to use them as effectively or more effectively than your enemy's expensive units. Basically, you want to spend $5 to destroy $50 of your opponent. And if you can do that, you'll win the war. It doesn't matter how long the war takes. Unless the enemy has unlimited reserves or is vastly outclassing you by several orders of magnitude, they're not going to be able to withstand you. If you take out their generals with a much cheaper unit, if you take out their heavy cavalry with much cheaper units, you take out their infantry with a single unit of cavalry, you just want to outclass your opponent, out-strategize them, and beat them tactically, as opposed to just sending wave after wave after wave of men at the enemy. Now, as I say that, I've got this massive army on the screen, so you guys are probably laughing at me when I say, use your men wisely. Don't just send hordes of units and just, I get it. I mean, this is probably a terrible visual metaphor from the point I'm trying to make. But there's a reason why my army got this big. My army got this big because look at the units. Cheap, 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 cheap. Lots of cheap units. And on Crusade, I managed to get a bunch of expensive units, yes. But I only just got most of these because I'm on Crusade now. And after the Crusade, I'm not going to be able to afford these guys at all. Well, I might keep most of them, but units like this guy here with the 520, no. I can always recruit another one on the next Crusade. He's at that point, he's nothing to me because I've got an army of like 20,000 troops sitting here, and I don't need one unit of Crusader Foot Knights that badly that I'm going to spend half of a settlement's income on it. Alright? Those are the units I'm going to get rid of. And these Crusader Knights with their cost of 655 upkeep, I don't need them that badly. They're good when they're free. But when they cost nearly 700 a turn, I mean, look, Angers is only generating 936 a turn, and Renee is only generating 855. So 2 units of those Crusader Knights are taking up almost 2 settlements worth of income. You do that, and you're just going to... It's just a bad idea. Now, I'm not saying get rid of all of them. If you can afford to, certainly have a single unit of Crusader Knights, especially when you can't recruit Feudal Knights that fast. Look, I've got maybe 1 or 2 settlements that can even recruit these things, and it takes like 4 or 5 turns for more of them to even show up. So, for right now, I'm okay with having a bunch of Crusader Knights, because they'll do the job. They'll do the job that the Feudal Knights would have done for me. But I can't recruit them this early because most of my settlements are still in the castle stage or earlier. There's not a whole lot of fortresses here. Okay, I think I captured that one and that one. So there's 1, 2. This one's still a castle. So I've got 1, 2, 3 fortresses, I think. It's not that impressive. I've only got a few places where I can even recruit the darn things. So, Feudal Knights are excellent superior cavalry, but for the time being, in the early part of your campaign, your best and easiest to find knights are actually going to be your Crusader Knights and the mailed knights that you can get from castles. But when you go on Crusade, these Crusader Knights are everywhere. You can recruit them in tons of regions. They're as common as the Crusader Sergeants. For the most part. So, I mean, while they're free, grab them. It's crazy not to. I mean, you can't get a better deal than 0 upkeep. But when the Crusade is over, they become far more burden than they're worth. When this Crusade is over, you can expect to see my massive unit of Crusader cavalry here and mercenary Frankish Knights. Most of these are going to die. I'm gonna disband them. Unless I conquer a lot of territory really soon, these are just more trouble than they're worth. Now, later on, when you've got a really massive empire, and you can afford to spend like 5,000 or 6,000 or 7,000 on a single stack of 20 units, go for it. You're not going to get much better quality than that. But the expense... I mean, it's going to cost as much as the entirety of France to have that kind of army, or more. I mean, you add up all the money that I'm getting in France, and then you try to do a unit of, or an army of 20 of these units, and they're all costing me like 700 a turn. Like this Mercenary Frankish Knights is 620, Crusader Knights is 655. It's just ridiculous. You're not going to want to have that many knights on in your army to begin with. Well, I mean, if you're going to put all those knights into your army, what about your infantry? There's no infantry in this army, and there's a reason for that. I'm using this army mostly for the javelin cavalry. What I do is I send this guy into battle first. He's my prince. And I send the javelin cavalry at the enemy, and I expend all their javelins, and then I withdraw them completely from battle. And then what happens is my non-AI controlled reinforcements come in, and while I'm fighting with my general and my 4 units of heavy cavalry here, then I've got more cavalry reinforcing me, or more infantry, or whatever. So I use these units as skirmishing units the way they were meant to be, using up all of their ammo and then getting the hell out of there without taking much casualties. That's one of the reasons why they're so. Some of them are so experienced, and I haven't lost too many units of Genites over the course of this campaign. I have had to resupply them and restock them, but I haven't had my Genites get wiped out, and they have gained a lot of experience along the way. This one guy has 7 experience, just because I was able to withdraw them completely from battle after they kill people, so they don't take any damage once they're gone. And then I pull in some more units, like let's say I keep these guys in reserve, these other Genites and these macemen and spearmen and foot knights and everybody, all these guys here, and I pull them in as reinforcements. And by then the battle's mostly over anyway, but these guys come in and they mop up the weakened units and the depleted units and the injured units and the exhausted units, and they can't stand up against these superior troops in an ordinary fight. And then once the fight has gotten that lopsided, these guys just come in and wreck them. So having them as reinforcement units to me is superior than having them in my main army of javelin cavalry, because I can use both, and I can command them both rather than put them under AI control. And then what I can do is I can pull in another general that has nothing but infantry units and spears and whatever infantry I can throw together, garbage units. And these guys don't have cavalry, and these guys don't have missiles, so the AI can't screw this up. Because what they sometimes do is the missiles that the AI fires end up hitting me, my own troops, and I can't tell them to stop firing. I have to command them to go somewhere, and that just wastes my time. So I put these spears and these regular infantry units under AI control, and I don't have to worry about them. The AI can handle them, and then I can focus on commanding my heavy cavalry, my javelin cavalry, and then my reinforcement army. Sometimes I bring in reinforcements of these guys, these javelin men, and I have them under my personal control. And then they're facing off against an army that's already been ravaged by my javelin cavalry. And they're being broken up by my heavy cavalry charges, and they're scattered everywhere, and they're in a bad mess. And then I send in this horde of Lusitanian javelin men, and it's enough to make you cry. It's just so devastating to watch these guys go to work against a foe that is already getting their ass kicked. So these are great reinforcements. The trouble is I don't want to put these guys under AI control, because once again, you give javelins to an AI, and what they're going to do is they're going to march right up to the middle of a melee and throw a bunch of javelins right where my general is sitting and kill my own general. Or because if you've noticed, if you leave certain units under AI control, like the Genites, for example, I've got all of these guys. If I send them under AI control, what's going to happen is they're going to throw a bunch of javelins, and it's going to be great, and then they're going to skirmish away, and then while they're skirmishing, they're going to be throwing javelins backwards, and they're going to end up hitting their own units. I've seen this happen, and it's dumb. The javelins are going to cause friendly fire under AI control. I can avoid that by controlling them personally. So certain units I control personally. Other units, if I can, I put them under AI control. Certain battles, I just control everything myself. But mercenary crossbowmen, peasant crossbowmen, archers, these sorts of things, I don't want to leave too many of these under AI control, because then it's going to cause friendly fire, and I can't control them when something bad happens, like a stray cavalry goes after them. I don't want to have this entire unit, this entire legion of crossbowmen and archers that I spent a while putting together. I don't want them to all mass rout just because I let a couple of feudal knights get away from me and attack them on the open battlefield. Now, if I wanted to, I could throw them behind some spear militia, which I did in this army. So I've got some spear militia and some levy archers all behind the spear militia, and this one does okay. I still wouldn't want to put it under AI control, because then what happens is the AI causes the general to charge into the middle of an enemy, and the general's dead, and then heavy cavalry gets through, busts up the spear militia line, and then the entire line of archers starts to rout, and this entire army gets wiped, because the AI doesn't know how to control shit. So don't put units that require your finesse under AI control. I only trust the AI to use spearmen and heavy infantry, and perhaps, let's say, Crusader Knights, and throw them under AI control, because they can handle charging into the enemy. I mean, you faced off against the AI, you know that if you face off against them, and they throw knights at you, they can handle them competently enough to cause you some havoc, and give you a real headache. So I trust the AI to not handle it as well as I would, because I could wipe out entire armies with these guys. But you put them under AI control, and they're going to do some damage. And unless you allow a situation for the AI stupidity to win the day, they're mostly going to make out of that battle alive. You put them under my control, though, and I can get 90% of them out alive, and they're going to cause, like, 10 times as many deaths as they took in casualties. So, it's a very good ratio. You'd rather keep them under your control, but for the love of God, don't put the Genites under AI control. Don't put your general's unit under AI control. Don't put archers under AI control. Keep missiles under your control, and just put spearmen and infantry and heavy cavalry under AI control as reinforcements. Use your Genites personally. Use your you can use some heavy cavalry personally, and archers especially. You need finesse to get any value out of these archers. You got to know when to fire, when to stop firing. That's important. Knowing when to stop firing. When the enemy starts routing, there's no use in continuing to shoot. Chase them down and kill them. You got to tell the archers to do that. If you don't, they're just going to keep on firing, and they're going to hit your own troops. Friendly fire is stupid. When you've already won the battle, why are you allowing more of your own troops to die? Think about that for a second. When the battle is won, I shouldn't lose a single soldier. But when you let the AI control things, you're going to keep losing men as your troops fire overzealously into a mass of units, some of which are your own troops. So, don't let the AI control it. They're too stupid. So, that's what I have to say about that. So we've covered, I think, every unit. At least all the early units for Portugal in this video. I mean, catapults, you know how to use catapults. Use them against the enemy walls, not so much against enemy units anymore. Ballista are better at hitting enemy units. I struggle to find a good use for these things. I mean, I'm not stupid, but ballista are going to miss a lot. They're the most accurate against troops that we have, but they're going to miss. And when they miss, they take a long time to reload, and they're just a one-trick pony. There are certain situations where they do great. You put them on a bridge and allow them to fire down the length of the bridge in a situation where they can shoot over the heads of your own troops. And that's so delicious. That's going to cause you enough casualties to make it worth it. The trouble is, that's a very specific situation where I already have a massive advantage. I mean, this is Portugal. If I can stop people at a bridge, then I've got all the javelins and crossbowmen in the world that's going to make crossing that bridge a living hell. Sorry about that. It's going to be damn near impossible. You could have army after army try to cross this bridge, and until I run out of crossbow bolts, you're not getting across. I could just park a couple of units of spear militia in front of that thing, and I will slow you down. No cavalry will be able to cross. The cavalry will all be dead. I promise you that. The infantry will be severely depleted and routing. You just can't cross a bridge if you're faced off against a mass of javelins and archers and crossbows. It's just not doable. You're going to lose more men than it's worth. if it were even possible to win that battle. Against a human opponent, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to bring a lot of your own missile units to fire back at them in order to make any headway. You'd have to bring so many reinforcements. You couldn't afford to get your general anywhere near there. Once he dies, the battle is done. So bridge battles, yeah, against Portugal, I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to do a bridge battle against Portugal. No, 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 no. So I'm already at a massive advantage. I'm on a bridge, for crying out loud. And I'm going to use a ballista there? Sure, that's great, but that's like kicking a puppy. Alright? I can do it, but I could have won without doing that. And catapults? Catapults are good. This is the unit of artillery that I'm going to use, because it's early enough that you can get it, and you can use it to conquer other nations before the Pope gets too pissed at you. That's primarily how I managed to make France my vassal. I was able to capture like 3 or 4 settlements in a single turn. I even captured Reims up here before I was told to quit it by the Pope. And then I moved my units away, and then the Genoese were able to snipe Reims from me. I don't care because I'm at war with them and the Pope hasn't told me to knock it off. But they did tell me to stop fighting against France, or else I'll get excommunicated. And because I've got so many units on Crusade, I don't want to get excommunicated, because then all these units will abandon me. There is a way around it. I mean, I can move my general and do a fort and move my general out of it, and then the next turn these guys will no longer be on Crusade, because they're considered a garrison for captured territory. It's one of the ways you can actually remove a unit from Crusade, but it's only under certain circumstances, like capturing a settlement or depositing your troops into a fort and then moving on. And it's expensive. That just cost me $500. And then the next turn, all these units are going to cost me their full amount. So I'm not going to do that unless I really want to. But that's how I was able to get these units out of Crusade, so I could do this introduction for you to the units, and able to show you what they look like with their upkeep. Otherwise, they'd be just like my other Crusader units that have no upkeep. And I wanted to show you the more accurate information, which is most of the time they're not going to be on Crusade anyway. So that's how you can get your units off of Crusade. If I wanted to, I could say use this massive troops and send them against a Catholic faction like Genoa, and park a Crusader unit outside of every one of their settlements, and use my general to make a fort, like so. Right about, yeah. And so there you go. There's your fort. Move my general out, and next turn all these guys will not be on Crusade, and I can use my general to go attack the Genoese city. Or there's another way to do it if you feel like being cheap, which is you take your general off of Crusade, and you have just the general unit selected when you attack a city. The thing is, that's such a loophole that it breaks the game. There's no challenge to this game at all if you can send crusading units against Catholic factions. I could have conquered pretty much the entire map by now. It's 62 turns in. If I could have just done a crusade and taken half of Europe, and then done another crusade and taken the other half of Europe, there's no challenge to the game anymore. I mean, I get that I've got this huge army that I made out of crusading, gaming the crusade mechanic, but what utterly breaks the game is doing stuff like that. So, we want to avoid doing this, or at least I do. You put him back on crusade and he stops doing the siege. But It's one thing to get a whole bunch of units for free upkeep on Crusade, but if you're battling against Catholic factions, which you're going to do for most of the Catholic campaign, um, the Crusade is really going to be most effective against Muslim factions, where you can just attack them directly while on Crusade. Crusading units aren't as useful unless you're willing to really game the system against a Catholic faction, unless you do workarounds like I just showed you, where you can move the crusading units and then make a fort and then move your general out of the fort, and now they're considered a garrison and they'll stop being on crusade. You could do that. I actually, believe it or not, I didn't do that for most of this campaign. That's why it's 62 turns in. I promise you, if I had been doing that, I would have done this by like turn 30 or something. It would be crazy easy to capture all this territory within a very short period of time with the kind of armies that you can field while on crusade, because they're so cheap, and all the castles that I own and all the areas where I can recruit mercenaries. It's crazy the kind of armies you can field when you use the crusade mechanics in a manner that maybe they weren't intended for. But if you give me the ability to go on crusade but not be able to attack Catholic factions, and then at the end of the crusade I've got this big army that cost me a fortune that I can't afford after I've been excommunicated, and I can't bribe the Pope anymore, and then the next crusade comes by, I can't join it because I've been excommunicated, and I'm bleeding tons of money because I've got all these frickin' crusaders that cost me 520 per turn. You know, there are downsides to having this massive army once the crusade ends, and there are downsides to having your army on crusade when you're battling against Catholic factions. If I were to move my troops all the way to the crusade target, I would have nobody back home. So I think of the crusade, and you know, your Muslim factions have the same bonuses when they're on jihad. So the game is easier on the player when they're on crusade or jihad, but it's not broken, in my opinion, until you start doing things like this, where you abuse the crusade mechanic to move armies a great distance, and then get them off of crusade using a loophole, or use them while on crusade and attack an enemy faction that you're not supposed to be able to do so using a loophole. And again, you can use these loopholes all you like on your own time in your own space, or if you're doing a blitz campaign. I used to be very good at those. The thing is, it ceases to be Medieval 2 Total War, and then it becomes the game of blitzing. It's its own challenge, and it is very challenging, don't get me wrong, to conquer the map as fast as you can, using anything but a cheat. And this is not considered a cheat, it's considered a loophole. There are some great Let's Plays out there showing world record blitz campaigns. This is not what I was going to do, however, on this campaign, because then the game simply becomes, what's the turn number that I achieved victory? And that's a challenge. That's a very good challenge in and of itself, but that's the only challenge at that point, because you're able to field such gigantic armies against sitting duck computer opponents that have no way of battling you in the same way because they're not smart enough. It ceases to be a game of you versus the computer, and it's more of a game of you versus the clock. And that's a different kind of way of playing the game, and it's not a way I'm going to showcase in this video or probably for a while, because most people are not going to be interested in that. They're more going to be interested in the role-playing aspects, or how to use the units effectively. And I hope I've covered that in this video. And in the next video, I think I might cover how I got this far, because I've got all my saved turns here. Yes, I've got from the very start of Portugal all the way till now, I save every turn, so I can see my progress or go back if I wanted to. Like here for example, in Portugal 56, I decided to go to war with France. And if I wanted to replay this, I could go back here and decide not to go to war with France. So I save at certain points. I also was testing out a new strategy, or a new strategy for me anyway, of using these various armies together Instead of using one army of 20 units versus another army of 20 units, I was going to mix things up by throwing in reinforcements or doing those withdrawal tactics with the Genites. Get them off the battlefield completely after they've thrown all their javelins and bring in reinforcements that I control, rather than having like 5 armies on the field at the same time, all under AI control. I wanted to control most of it. So I was doing a save where I was going to test out the combined arms strategy. And let me see, combined arms. Let me load that up real quick. Maybe I'll even demonstrate it for you. Alright, what do we got? Where was the combined arms battle? It was right around here. Yep. I had gotten my king with his units of Genites, and I was going to have him go against the this big French army here. And I was going to use spearmen as reinforcements controlled by the AI, and I was going to use these javelin men as reinforcements controlled by me. Now, my game may crash. Sometimes that happens, so let's hope it doesn't happen. But this is what I'm going to do. Let me make sure I get the right units. Okay, Captain Gabriel's the one I want to command myself. And then the others, I want to let the AI control, and I don't want to personally control them. To battle! So I'm going to be controlling the javelins, and the computer's going to be controlling the spears. Lots of loading, sorry about that. When I get better at editing, I'll just cut this sort of stuff out, so we can skip right to the action. Alright, start deployment. Alright, these guys are all heavy cavalry. Let's put them as a single whatever. I'm going to keep my general away from the battle for the time being. The heavy cavalry, I'm going to put in a single line way back here for the time being, and then I'm going to use my Genites on skirmish mode. Start. Alright, these guys have no chance. Alright. Now, they've got some things that are going to help them out. The ballista and the artillery and more ballista and more catapults. Yeah. They've got some teeth. The trouble is they can't move around too much, and I can. And when we get about to right here... Oh, see, they're trying to hide inside the... I think they're hitting their own troops here. Yeah, okay, now right about here, I'm going to start throwing my javelins. And we're going to cause some damage here. So far, nothing in terms of casualties. Throw, throw, throw. Oh yeah, they're taking some damage. Oh, Yep, that's always something that you want to see. You want to see all this damage happening to the enemy. Let's look. They've already taken 14% casualties, and I've taken basically 0. Alright, they're going to get some lucky shots in, though. So I got to watch out. Okay, Feudal Knights. Let's go after them. There we go. Alright. Now, they're being hit by javelins, and they're going to be surrounded. Yep. Yeah, and now they're routing. And now once they rout, I don't want to throw javelins at them anymore. I just want to chase them down. So, chase them down and hit them with your swords. There we go. That's better. Alright. Now, I've used up pretty much most of my javelins here, so I'm just going to withdraw all of these units by hitting the withdraw button. I don't think they're following my commands right. So let me just reissue another order. Have them all go over to here. And once they've followed my commands properly this time, I'm going to... That might be a discipline problem. I'm going to have them withdraw from the battle. Now, I'm going to send my cavalry, my heavy cavalry, and we're going to destroy the enemy. I haven't even used my reinforcements yet. See, now I'm going to use my general. I mean, this battle was just a slaughter from the get-go. I can't even find the enemy anymore. Where are they? They're all over the place. They're scattered. The mercenary spearmen. Here we go. Yeah. My reinforcements won't even make it onto the battlefield in time to cause any damage. Okay. I almost forgot about these guys. These are like the only fighting units left that the enemy even has. Now that battle happened really quickly, so I apologize if I didn't talk about it in too much detail. But it's a really simple battle because I've just got such overwhelming force. But the idea is, how many men did I actually lose? It says allies killed 17%, but that's not killed actually. That's allies that I withdrew from the field. Now, how many of my men actually died? We'll see at the end of this battle. But, you know, we just killed thousands of French troops for, you know, what kind of cost are we talking about here? Almost none. And that's how you really want to conduct your campaigns. Unless you like seeing your troops slaughtered, in which case, more power to you. Let's speed things up. I mean, this battle is over for all intents and purposes. All that's left here is some ballista. And I really don't want them to get... See, that's the thing. You bring too many troops to the battlefield, and then the enemy's going to be able to inflict more casualties. What's that somebody said? We're completely surrounded, so now we've got them right where we want them. Which is everywhere. There's a little bit of that going on when you put too many troops on the battlefield, because then a stray unit of ballista can hit all these infantry units that didn't have a chance to actually attack. Because, I mean, the battle's over before they even reach the enemy. So I probably would have done better in this battle if I didn't even let the AI reinforce me. You get what I mean? Like, sometimes more is not better. And I say that with this huge, massive army. So I know I'm a little bit of being hypocritical here. But here's a situation I can illustrate where all these infantry units didn't even see battle, and they put themselves in jeopardy enough that the enemy artillery units were able to at least take a shot at them. That's sloppy. That's sloppy. And one of the themes of this video is to try not be sloppy with your troops. You know, trying to preserve their lives. I mean, look at my heavy cavalry that saw a lot of action in this battle, didn't die very much. Look, some of my infantry units somewhere. Oh yeah, the AI reinforcements that saw action took some damage because of some enemy. I think the enemy cavalry, the enemy general charged into them. I didn't micromanage that as well as I could have. But, I mean, we killed 1,200 troops for a cost of about 400 or so. And, of course, we got all our prisoners back. And some units will heal, but we basically inflict massive casualties on the enemy, and the troops that I'm most concerned with, my Genites and my heavy cavalry, my general, didn't take much damage while inflicting tons of damage. And the units... Here we go. Oh, they do? Well, give it to me. Yeah, give me money. There we go. Money. I like money. Okay. So, I mean, my Genites took a little bit, but they gained some experience, and that's how you get experienced Genites. And these units of ordinary spear militia with no experience are the ones that took some casualties. And boom, this is what I do afterwards. I reform the army, and boom. Okay, I lost a unit, but now these are all full strength units with more experience. That's generally how I conduct my campaign, at least in this campaign. I was trying a combined arms strategy of, let's use these as my main forces and then get some reinforcements in there. It would have been better if the French army was better equipped. It was a bunch of artillery and some infantry and some cavalry. And it wasn't even a full stack. So this strategy would have been better against a more pressing challenge. Like, I'm aware that there's a big army near Paris, or there will be at some point. But let's say these two armies were stacked together, or standing next to each other, and I use that combined army strategy against that target, then you would have seen a lot more bang for your buck. I would have taken more casualties, but I would have inflicted more casualties, and you would have really seen the power of that withdrawal strategy and the bringing in of these Lusitanian javelin men, which honestly didn't even get to see battle because the battle was over too fast. But, you know, these are first world problems. Kicking the enemy's ass too hard. Yeah, I mean, I want to have problems like that. Seriously. You know, I'm not too concerned with beating the enemy so badly that they can't handle it. You know, that's an excellent problem to have, and a problem I want everyone to have. So hopefully this video was able to demonstrate that. But this was earlier in my campaign. I just wanted to show that off. Alright, I think this is a good place to end for now. If you enjoyed it, then I'm ever so happy that you decided to check it out. Check out this video in this channel. I'm not even sure if I'm going to upload this. I'm still really new at this, and I probably need to edit the hell out of this video to make it even viewable. But if you enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up or a subscribe, and I promise I'll make more. Thanks for watching.